Putting pen to paper and signing a rental agreement on a new house or apartment is an exciting moment, a new start. But what if we told you you may be signing an agreement that's designed to make you pay and pay?
For example, we had a case where the lease said that any repairs that are under, I think, $400 or something like that are the responsibility of the tenants. Just patently illegal under North Carolina law.
I'm Erica Bryant, and this is the Tenants Toolkit, a 7-part mini-series created to help those who may find themselves facing eviction understand their rights and what they can do to stay in their home. Because if you're facing a housing-related crisis, you aren't alone. Here in Charlotte, rapid growth has created a shortage of affordable housing options, and the Tenants Toolkit is here to help. In this series, you'll receive a step-by-step guide to finding, budgeting for, and staying in your home long-term. This episode focuses on rental contracts. If you take nothing else from this chapter of this series, make sure you remember this. Read your lease before you sign it. Read every word. Most landlords aren't out to take advantage of people in difficult situations, but some are. And taking a few minutes to prepare yourself and to familiarize yourself with the lease agreement you're being asked to sign can be the difference between a manageable situation and a situation that could set you on a path to eviction. Earlier in this series, we met Amy, who's been evicted multiple times. She says she always reads her lease before she signs it, and those few minutes have saved her from being unfairly evicted more than once.
And there have been times where I have put the attorney for the landlord on the spot because I have said I cannot find anywhere in my lease where it states that the landlord receiving a partial payment can receive a partial payment and still evict me. And that's thrown them for a loop because if they do accept a partial payment, 9 times out of 10, it's nowhere in the lease that says that they can still evict.
So read your lease. Our panel of experts agree that most landlords aren't deceptive. Some are simply using template rental agreements that may include elements that are illegal. Some don't even know these items are in the lease.
We had one lady that has 6 or 7 children.
Tiffany Bost is with Crisis Assistance Ministry, a Charlotte nonprofit that works almost exclusively with people facing housing emergencies like evictions or late utility payments. The woman she is referring to was forced to move when her landlord decided to sell the property where she was living. She found a place willing to rent to her, but when she took home the lease and read it, she found a line that stated she would be responsible for all repairs to the property.
She said, Miss Tiffany, it was on the 18th page. I said, well, how many pages was the lease? And she said it was like 27. Buried it. But she took it home. She took that and she advocated for herself, and now she's in an affordable house.
Some things to look for when you read through your lease are hidden fees and who is responsible for utility payments. Hidden fees can be anything from trash pickup to penalties when your rent is late, and this one is important. Legal aid attorney Isaac Sturgill says many landlords will implement late fees, but not many tenants are aware the amount of the penalty that can be charged is limited by law.
And you can charge one late fee. It can't be more than $15 or 5% of the rent, but we've seen leases that say it's $50 late fee after the 5th, and every day after that it's another $20 or something like that. And that's just patently illegal under North Carolina law.
Check this in your lease as well. In the event you get evicted, who pays the court costs? Be sure these costs don't show up before an eviction notice is delivered. Typically, when you rent a new apartment or house, you'll be asked for the first month's rent, the last month's rent, and a security deposit equal to 1 month's rent. Make sure this is spelled out in very clear terms in your lease agreement. Make sure the agreement states the amounts of all 3 of these items and how payment is to be delivered and when. Make sure the lease is very specific about what charges can be applied to your security deposit and how and when you may have your security deposit refunded. A particularly sticky point on most leases is if and when the security deposit or your last month's rent can be applied to your current rent obligation. And then, when the lease you are signing expires, what happens after that?
The most typical arrangement we see is that usually a typical lease will last for a year and then it will convert to a month-to-month after that. Not all leases are like that. A lease can say pretty much anything. I mean, it could say after the first year, it'll renew for another year, but the rent goes up $100. It could be anything that the parties agree to. So a tenant should never assume what a lease says. It's important to keep a copy of it and read it. When the original term of the lease ends, the lease is going to say that. If you don't have it, if you're not paying careful attention to it, you're not going to know whether or not you have an option to renew or whether it will automatically renew or what those terms are going to be. Mm-hmm.
And another important point, make sure that the terms of ending the lease early are fair and that you understand them completely. As we mentioned, responsibility for repairs are another item where tenants can get taken advantage of.
A retaliatory eviction is an eviction where the landlord is filing the eviction case in response to the tenant taking some type of act that's protected under the law. And the most common one is where tenants complain about repairs. And that under North Carolina law is illegal. So for example, if I'm a tenant and I'm asking my landlord to repair a leaky pipe in the house and the landlord ignores me and I get upset after a while and I say, well, the landlord's not going to do it. I've been asking him for weeks, so I'm going to call the city and have a housing code inspector comes out. So that the housing code inspector comes out, the landlord finds out, gets upset, and in response to that, he files an eviction against the tenant. That would be an example of a retaliatory eviction.
And that will hold up in court. The lease should also specify when your landlord is allowed to show up on your property, if advance notice is required for a visit, and other property rules like house guests and parking, and of course, pets. The rental agreement is a two-way street, and being a responsible tenant can go a long way to having a friendly relationship with the property owner. Be prepared to handle minor maintenance and repairs on your own. For example, replacing light bulbs and furnace filters, and avoid causing damage, always keeping in mind that while you live there, it's not really your property. As we've said repeatedly, knowledge is power. Read your lease. Know where it is so you can refer to it if you feel like your landlord is taking advantage of you. Having an understanding of the lease, knowing where the hidden items that could land you in trouble are located, and keeping records of all correspondence with the landlord can keep you from being unfairly or illegally evicted. I'm Erica Bryant. Special thanks to Isaac Sturgill, Amy Anderson, and Tiffany Bost for lending their perspective and expertise. For links to the resources mentioned in this podcast, go to thetenantstoolkit.com. In the next chapter of the Tenants Toolkit, tenant rights.
If there's any maintenance issues that I have been requesting to be fixed and they weren't fixed, but then I received court papers, I now know that that's retaliation. I can fight that in court.
The Tenants Toolkit was made possible by the Charlotte Executive Leadership Council and Foundation for the Carolinas in collaboration with the Queen City Podcast Network and Balto Creative Media. From Foundation for the Carolinas, producers are Hillary Crittenden, Jennifer Morlew, and Katie Koff. From the Queen City Podcast Network and Balto Creative Media, this series was produced by Brian Baltashevitz, written by Pamela Escobar and Meredith Carter, engineered by Sarah Pollock, and edited by Kanata Edwards and Elizabeth Egan.